That's fine.
You know,
I like your walking pad.
Thank you. Oh, good segue. Speaking of segues, Paul Blart. That
was good.
That was a double entendre.
Whatever happened to Kevin James? He's come back as a meme,
I think,
and that's about it.
he's not the one that got. No, Rob Schneider got canceled.
Rob Schneider got canceled.
Or like,
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the second installment. We actually decided to throw this together again. I know we were calling it Nothing at All, but it seems to me like it's coming as a monthly music mental health meetup, or as I like to call it,
You had that in the bag.
I did.
You were just like, you're driving on the way over here, like, oh, this
is gonna kill.
This is
gonna kill the one or two people that are gonna listen to
yeah,
it.
like, oh yeah.
So it's kind of a big week though, because two things are coming up, or two things have happened musically for the both of us that I'm actually pretty excited about. One is, so the whole reason why we were even thinking about starting this, I guess, conversation or whatever, is because I've recently put a band together.
I want to. Okay, hold on. Insert the applause. So, man, I wish I had I need one of those things.
Like one of
the soundboard. Yeah, I'll probably put it in post.
It's like with the sound effects, like. Yeah. Food fight and all assorted things.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, the air horns.
I'll put that one too.
So yeah, we were talking about this like about maybe a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. It was like the beginning of the year, and I had been practicing with this new group. I got together with a bassist and a drummer, and they seemed to be on board with what I'm trying to do and stuff. And so we actually got on the bill of a show at Sahara Lounge. I'm not just plugging the show, but
I'm pretty sure you're just plugging the show.
I'm kind of just plugging the show. So we have a show at Sahara Lounge on February 27th. And I was really excited about it because I thought we were going to get to play with one of my favorite local bands, Winkler Mill. It's a band that I know pretty well. Super nice guys, and they have a residency at Sahara Lounge, and so we got on the bill, and all of a sudden I was thinking, you know what, Raul and I already talk about music all of the time.
Yeah.
We also talk about mental health all of the time.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. it's our two favorite. Those are our two favorite subjects. Yeah. So I think I had pitched to you. I was like, why don't we just have like a podcast-esque, type of thing, and we weren't really sure if it was going to be like recurring or just like a one-time thing, but that was the whole reason for kind of starting the conversation. Is like, hey, something is, I'm starting to get
something in the way.
Something is happening.
Yeah.
All we're gonna do is interrupt ourselves with songs the whole time.
Yeah.
But something was starting to move again to where I was like, I just want, I want to get back into music and start playing again. And so what better way to work through those issues that we talked about kind of in the first, episode or whatever, than to just sit down with you, talk about them,
display them all over the internet.
Yeah. And just really make ourselves look like a bunch of fools.
Yeah.
But the other exciting thing that's happening, so, again, we got two things happening simultaneously between you and I got the show, and you recently got all of your music back up on streaming, which so for a while it had disappeared. Tell us about that.
Tell me about that. So
tell somebody about it.
Long story short, I kind of went into like a little bit of like a head thing, let's call it a head thing.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to like delete my music pretty often. Just I don't know. What did I say? My mom calls it a bad picture.
Bad picture. Yeah,
or embarrassing photo. Mentality.
And to be fair, like we talked about that a little bit in the last episode.
Did we?
Yeah. Oh. And it's good because I was right there with you. I know what it's like. I've deleted my share of stuff. It's a very frustrating process. I think I even mentioned it was one of the few things that I actually like regret as far as like patterns that I've picked up or something. So we both have that shared, like, hey, I just want to get rid of, start from scratch, clean slate. But I think you've started kind of realizing that it doesn't serve you very well to do that.
Yeah, like it's just one of those things where you're always trying to like solve the problem instead of trying to figure out what the problem is.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and kind of facing it. And
Yeah.
I think in this instance, a lot of it was like, I think I don't feel like I can envision a way everything I've done up to this point like makes sense together. But really, like the actual issue was, I feel like not like I'm embarrassed of what I've made up to this point, because it's
Right.
kind of like I remember watching what's the documentary called? But it's the Foo Fighters documentary. It's,
Okay.
It's the one where it leads up to them recording "Wasting Light."
Yes.
And basically, like he was talking, like it sucks because like the Foo Fighters, every band has their growing pains.
Right.
They just had their growing pains like in public, so they lose guitar players, they lose drummers, whatever, right? I had kind of a similar thing where it was just like I had all my growing pains of like trying to figure out what I like and don't like as a creative. I just had them on the internet in front of however many followers, you know what I
Right.
mean, or like in bands and stuff, and just. I never really knew what I wanted, and I never really knew what was right and what was wrong. I knew kind of what I didn't like and what I liked, but
Right.
a lot of that kind of gets a little bit obscured with like insecurities.
Sure. I guess the good thing is it was never like, and if I'm misspeaking, like please let me know. But it at the very least, was not super high stakes because you obviously had a following.
Yeah.
and we talked a little bit about how you had previously been on a label, and I think you were most prominent like on Bandcamp and Twitter and things like that.
Everything was close enough to the ground
Yeah.
to not feel like I was losing too much.
Right.
But like I also
That
felt
still shouldn't minimize it.
I
Obviously.
still should have minimized my accomplishments and stuff. But
or the difficulties.
exactly. And I think what I finally like I'm coming to terms with now is that everything I've done and all the people I've ever worked with, like, all of that's a blessing,
Right.
in its own way.
Yep.
It's just I've earned my stripes in a lot of ways, but not to be like, oh, like, I did this work. Like,
I'm
no,
a grizzled veteran.
no, not anything like that. I have a bunch of great memories with not only like what I've done but with my friends too.
Right, exactly.
And I think that kind of was the root of a lot of like my feelings and stuff, and not being able to like truly like internalize that, which is I am good enough.
Sure.
I am good enough, and what I did was cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to continue to be good enough, and I'm going to continue to do cool stuff.
Let me ask you this, because I know we talked about, the community that you had kind of helped grow, like in Laredo, for instance, right?
Yeah.
With like the radio show, Too Hip.
And even before that, like just like the whole like,
Playing shows, being in bands, writing songs, producing your friends, the
making
label,
music, making friends, and fighting around the world.
You know what I'm talking about? I think, what is that?
That's from South Park. That's the Russell Crowe.
Oh, the Russell Crowe. And you had the kind of like, I guess, mini label with Julian, which
Yeah.
it was Imaginary Era.
Imaginary Era.
Yeah. And so, and I don't even know if we've ever talked about this, but what do you feel? What compelled you to kind of like step away from that and make your way to Austin, like so many people do, like I did, because Austin being the beacon of music that it is. What do you feel like was at the heart of what drew you here?
Money, bro. I needed a job.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing. This is not a cheap hobby.
Right.
This is very much not a cheap hobby.
Right.
And I mean, I can go into the intricate details of the terrible job economy of Laredo, right? But
sure.
But I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's okay.
but like, yeah, man, like it was just one of those things where like,
So there's a practical thing too.
it was 100%
yeah.
job.
Yeah.
It was, and nothing more than that.
It had
But-
nothing to do with music or
at all.
Gotcha.
Like if anything, like if I could be making, good money in Laredo, I still would be there.
Sure.
All my friends were there.
Yeah.
I've developed so many contacts. I've done so much, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
I left at a point where even before the pandemic, like I was still getting hit up for stuff.
Right.
Even a little bit into like the pandemic kind of like, I don't want to say chilled out, but like people started doing stuff,
Right.
even though it probably wasn't safe.
Yeah.
and I was still getting hit up for stuff, and it was just like,
Right.
I do want to, but I gotta handle this
My
other thing
business,
first.
yeah.
Your business first.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I need a good job. I need to be independent. I need to like have my footing with this stuff. Like I can't. I'm definitely not gonna be on some like man baby thing or like you know.
I will.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
But like, I mean, all this, but you still like prioritize your job and stuff, man.
You have to.
You have
I
to.
mean, you have to. I mean, like you said, this is not a cheap hobby, and again, I'll do you one better. It's like it's not a cheap passion. You know what I mean? Because that's really what it comes down to for the both of us, I think.
It's also just not a cheap life.
Yeah, that's life is not cheap. That's definitely the takeaway from this conversation. Is yeah. It's I talk to Kayla, my fiance, all the time. That it's just hard to have capacity for everything, and I really admire the people that have a lot on their plates, that they do their best to prioritize and organize, because those are not things that I'm necessarily good at, whether it comes to, hey, we're growing a family, or, just even something as straightforward as, hey, I want time for, exercise and to go to my job and to have hobbies and to see my friends. And it's just, different points in my life, that I've been in between jobs or whatever, I've been like, how do people do this? I'm really going to go back out there and get another job, and I have to, but it's just like, how the heck does anybody just not...
How do they juggle it?
Yeah. Like, how do you not just crash and burn? And the fact is that a lot of people do. Yeah. That's what burnout is, and then they have to put the pieces back together and pick themselves up. And, that's a lot of that has been what you and I talk about, and the good thing is, luckily I'm at a point in my life where I feel pretty employable. Yeah. And you've got yourself a great job. And so we're kind of able to give some attention to the music side of things.
Yeah. It's a privilege.
Yeah.
As much as people don't realize it is a privilege.
That's one of the things, that was one of the big takeaways that I had from when we had our first conversation, is that, you were emphasizing the idea of, we get to do this.
Yeah.
And I think I've been absorbing that as much as possible, especially the times when I get really like tripped up and, I get frustrated because it's a frustrating endeavor, because, I'm willing to say that one of my biggest struggles is definitely like the idea of envy. People that have opportunities, people that, how are these people getting these opportunities? Whether it's followers on social media or shows around town or whatever the case, it can be discouraging, but it's also a matter of like, you just got to learn to have fun with it, accept that it's something that you get to do, and stay in your lane.
Another thing is that it's also like patience too, man. Like, it's like, one thing I was talking about with Nicole, like, while we were enjoying our delicious cafeteria meal at Sonic, was you really gotta like realize that things take time.
Yeah,
things take a lot of time, and if you spend too much time dreaming, and imagining this person that you're not in the moment,
sure, like
you're gonna get stuck doing that, dude. And it's like a vicious cycle, because it's like you need to really like be present and be like, what I'm doing right now is badass. And that's what I was saying like earlier. It's just like you need to like tell yourself like, what I'm doing is good,
right? And
I do cool shit.
Yeah.
And and tomorrow I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna be good enough and I'm gonna continue to do cool stuff.
Right.
But that's not something that you can say like when you're like, oh, tomorrow I'm gonna do something cool and I'm gonna be good tomorrow. Like, no. You are good enough right now.
Right now. Yeah.
And you're doing cool stuff right now.
Sure.
And you need to always allow yourself to do that, man, because it's like the more you... And this is something me and you have talked about a lot, which is self-imposed limitations.
Yeah.
You can't be at the mercy of those, bro. Like, they're not real.
Yeah.
They're not real. You know what I mean? You're making them real. And then it's like, and then you come back at it and you're like, oh no, like I can't do this because I wasn't wearing the right socks.
Right.
Like,
yeah. And it sounds funny, but it's sometimes it is that arbitrary.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't have the proper, I didn't name my project the right thing, and I didn't reach. I'm not following the right people on social media, or I'm not contacting the right places, and yeah, I mean, I think we did mention the non-existent limitations, and I think the reason I brought it up with you before is that I spoke to Kayla about it, and I told her, I think two of my biggest problems, probably my two biggest problems when it comes to the idea of music and wanting to participate in it, is that I put completely imaginary limitations. They're not coming from anywhere else or anybody else. And on top of that, I have completely unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it makes so much sense that there be so much stress and unhappiness because you're basically limiting yourself while still maintaining these impossible expectations.
Yeah.
Because there's impossible expectations even if you don't limit yourself. So imagine when you're holding yourself back.
It's even harder.
You're basically you're
screwed.
Yeah. You're not moving anywhere. You're not accomplishing anything.
You're also not living in the presence too. Because you got to think about what expectations are.
Right.
You're thinking about what you can do,
right.
What is possible, what you want to do, but that's not in that moment.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a future sight kind of thing.
Exactly.
And then you got to think about what these self-imposed limitations are. Like, those are things that you're almost creating an obstacle. Obstacles are the only thing.
I love that song. I'm so happy. I'm going to stop just real quick to say I'm so happy that your music is back on streaming, man.
I know,
man. I implore anybody that can even listen to this podcast, that chooses to listen to this podcast or whatever you want to call it, you have to listen to Raul's music. It's under Raul Gonzalez Jr. on all streaming services. He's also performed or recorded under Creature in the Spiral, Innocent Android, Animal Friendship. These are all projects that definitely deserve a lot of attention. And, I think that's always been my biggest thing. It's like, man, if he struggles... Then what the hell am I supposed to do? Because you're so prolific. I mean, you've got so much material.
Thank you, man. The struggle is imaginary.
Yeah.
The
struggle is not real.
Yeah, the struggle is not real.
The struggle is real. No, it's not actually.
Yeah, it's not.
It's quite imaginary for some people, right? I mean, some other people have genuine difficulties.
But that's kind of like my point that I was making. It's like, like the expectations are you're living too much in the future.
Right.
Your obstacles that you create are like, that's kind of almost like an in-between point between you and the future, which is like, at what point are you thinking in this moment, like, what am I doing right now that's like valid? Sure. And it's funny. I have a this is going to be like a little like related, but it's kind of funny. Like at my job. We have a new team lead, and my coworker, like, she, like, we have like a quality control process whenever we're like doing like our stuff. Okay. It's like, to not get too deep into it, but like basically my team lead is very like focused on finding what's wrong with the work. Okay. Versus what's good about it. What you all
are doing well.
Yeah, what we're doing well.
Right.
Because in her mind, like, in order to like streamline processes, you got to really like work out the kinks,
right? And single out the stuff.
Single out the bad stuff. Yeah. But if you focus too much on highlighting the bad stuff, you're not giving too much credit or validation to the good things.
That's true.
And that's hindering your morale.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Especially your team morale.
Yep.
So think about it, like, when you do that to yourself, you're too focused on what you're not. You're too focused on what you can't do. You're too focused on these things that, like, you may or may not have control over, but that's besides the point. Like, you're not highlighting what's excellent about you.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at now with my music. It's like, bro, like, I've done so much stuff. I've made so much cool music, and I have not once like told myself, good job. Yeah. And hey, that was all this thing you've done. Like, it's cool.
Well, and that's, and I guess that's what I always kind of strived to do whenever we would have conversations. I'd always want to just give you props and stuff. And obviously, that's why it's good to have people in your life that, because you can't always get the validation from, the audience, right? Yeah. Quote unquote, because that's pretty vague. You know, most of the time they're faceless. Yeah. Most of the time you don't even know that you've made an impact or reached them until way later, And so Yes, it's true that sometimes you've got people in your life that'll just kind of blow smoke and say, "Oh yeah, it's great,
Yeah.
it's great, it's good." Good.
I'm not telling you that you're great just because I'm your mom.
Right, right.
I'm being for real.
Exactly. It's that kind of thing where like you try to surround yourself with people that are gonna shoot straight with you and tell you like, "Hey, like this is great, keep going." Basically, that's I feel like that's the thing. It's not like, "Oh, this is great, it's the best thing in the world." It's like keep pushing,
Yeah.
because there's something there,
Yeah.
right?
And I feel like, making these like trying to streamline my things. Like I'm seeing all these people like starting to follow me like on Instagram now that I kind of like centralized it in a way. And you can start seeing like where like I remember these people like, and I can think of times where like how you're like doing that for me.
Sure.
I have always tried to do that for other people, bro.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it's like on paper or to certain standards was good or not.
Right.
To me, that never existed, man. Like I don't think there's such thing as good or bad. Whether you can argue with me until you're blue in the face. Like I'm never gonna like admit or validate that like there's such thing as good and bad when it comes to this type of stuff, dude. There's good in everything.
Gotcha.
Like there's good art all over the place. You know what I mean? Just because you don't get it doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I've always tried to like uplift my friends who try to make stuff because it's like, bro, like you have such a finite amount of time to like get to do this stuff.
Sure.
You know what I mean? For the most part. And everything you make is just like a testament to that moment and who you are at that time. You know what I mean? It's always a journey. You know what I mean? Just because you tripped on a rock in the beginning of your journey doesn't make that part of it like terrible. It's just, it's a time and place. You know what I mean? And it's like, you just gotta you have to just tell yourself that you're good enough. You know what I mean? I'm going to keep coming back to that. It's you gotta tell yourself that you're good enough and that everything you're doing is cool. You know what I mean? But another thing too that I feel like is a big turning point is like, and I think you probably struggle with it a lot, is believing that, and believing it and being like, when you tell yourself you're good, but do you actually believe it? You know?
Right.
And I think that takes a long time too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean it's definitely like, again, I think we've talked about a couple of things already that it's an ongoing struggle, like it never really ends, and it's kind of like an everyday thing. And I feel like it's an everyday thing for everything. It's you're never going to reach like a point or a plateau where you're like, yep, enlightenment, it's kind of hard to believe that, I don't know, this may sound kind of like, maybe too out there or too corny or something, but the more that I think about it, the idea of like finding nirvana, not the band, but,
where's the last?
But finding like that inner peace or that state of mind, I think it's less about, hey, I've reached the point of nirvana or I've reached peace about the the stress, and it's more like I've made peace with the fact that there is no peace, and because of that, I can sort of ride the tide.
You know what Chase told me the other day? Actually,
what's that?
I thought it was like a great way to think of stuff. I've been on this kick of like, I need to eliminate bad things. You know what I mean? Eliminate bad food, eliminate bad habits, elimination. You know what I mean? And his mentality was like, I don't think that's like the healthiest way to look at like, making changes or like developing healthy habits.
Oh, he doesn't think getting rid of.
It's not about getting rid of. It's about minimizing.
Yeah.
Minimizing.
Sure.
Hey, you're having a bad feeling about, whatever thing you're doing creatively, like just minimize it. You don't have to be like, oh no, I had another like negative thought.
Yeah.
I didn't eliminate it.
Yeah.
And then therefore that's a failure.
Right.
No, it's just about minimizing. Hey, you know what? I only felt like shit 2 times this week.
Right.
And last week I felt like shit 3 times. Sure. So it's like, that's progress in a way.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's a great point that he makes and that you're emphasizing, because again, that's pretty much what they tell you in like mindfulness is that your mind is going to wander. You meditate or whatever the case, your mind is going to go to places that you may not necessarily want it to go to. But the trick is to not judge yourself for those things. It's like, why am I thinking like that? Oh, I'm always bringing myself down. It's like, yeah, but now you're bringing yourself down for bringing yourself down.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're getting into this cycle, and that's why they talk. I think that cyclical things are such a a recurring theme in like mindfulness and meditation, because it's you get trapped in the hamster wheel of like negativity and just constantly the echo chamber, like we mentioned last time, the echo chamber of like just constantly putting yourself down, beating yourself up and stuff like that. So I mean, minimizing the negative thoughts, minimizing, how much time you actually spend not emphasizing the positive stuff, and it's hard. Again, it's hard.
Yeah.
We all know that stuff is constantly happening daily. A lot of other things socially, politically, and everything going on is going to feed into that as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to obviously just do what they feel might be best for them. I think one of the most sinister things about it is that everything that happens around us has a way of imposing its will on us, making us think that we need to be, involved in everything.
Yeah.
In order to actually be human or enlightened or whatever you want to call it, right? But I don't know. Everybody's kind of got their own equilibrium to find.
Yeah.
Like you can't necessarily tell the person that maybe has this really intense, committed job that they're, that actually does contribute to society. Like, hey, you got to contribute more. Like, how do you say?
How do I do it more?
Yeah, who do you put the emphasis on? Like,
and
you need to contribute more. You contribute not so much. It's like everybody. It's like, whoa.
Yeah, and then those are realistic limitations,
right?
Those are not self-imposed.
Exactly.
Those are actual like real life like limitations.
And and those are still limitations that you have to find your way through. So imagine again doubling up and being like, okay, so not only is society coming after us, but then so am I? I'm doing it to myself.
Yeah,
so it's just a constant. All we're doing is. God, this is a terrible image, but I feel like it's the first thing that comes to mind. There's the play by Henry Miller, The Crucible. When they used to execute people by just putting weight on their chest until they, confessed, or until they, they would just place heavy rocks, like flat sheets of rock. And I feel like that's just what we constantly do to ourselves. It's just like, hey, I'm going to take on another heavy sheet of rock and I'm going to put it right on my chest.
Whether I can bear it or not.
Because this is either what I expect of myself, expectations, or this is what people expect of me, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And is it any wonder that when we start getting anxious and panicking, the first place that we feel it is in our chest.
Do you think you think it's like a perspective problem?
How so?
In the sense that like, oh, you're supposed to bear more. That's your job. That's your duty.
Well, I mean, I think I can genuinely say that it can certainly be a cultural one.
Yeah.
Because I know that, coming from Hispanic culture, like I think it's pretty common for you and I to have heard like, you just gotta suck it up.
Yeah, sacrifice.
You just got to deal with it.
Sacrifice is part of the
take care of it. Yeah. It doesn't really matter what you want. It's about the family unit, or whatever it is that you're working toward, or the grind.
Yeah.
Stay in your lane and just try to don't talk about your emotions. You know, and the funny thing is there's it's across the board. We're so quick to like recognize differences in people, but the fact is like every culture kind of has its own version of just stay in your lane, don't talk about your emotions, and
the sheet of rock.
Yeah, just every culture has its own sheetrock.
Yeah,
I guess, and then you just constantly are adding to it, and so like, it's liberating yourself from all that is a very tricky thing, know, and more than anything, I think. That's the connection between like this, idea of mental health and music. It could be music could be, you can put anything in the place of music, It just so happens that you and I are two musicians that have real issues with putting too much rock on their chest sometimes. And I was thinking to myself, why is it always easier to tell people like, hey, this maybe try this. This is what's best for you. And then when it comes to us, we're
like, oh, I can't figure it out.
Yeah, just can't figure it out.
Because it's easier to deal with other people's problems than to deal with your own.
Right. And the funny thing is, having conversations like this, though, brings it out in the open, you know, and so all of a sudden you're helping somebody hopefully deal with it, and then you're helping yourself in some way because it's out in the open.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than just kind of sitting around and letting yourself ruminate, you know, and stew on all of this, like just constant barrage of negativity. So
I'll tell you one thing. I'm kind of proud of myself. Like, 2 days ago or so, I finally sent a booking email after 3 years. I think I finally sent a booking email, and it kind of is going. I feel like it's falling on deaf ears. I did get a response pretty quickly, but I think it is falling on deaf ears because I think it just, you know, you ever have those moments of like confirmation bias that kind of go wrong?
Sure.
Yeah, it's just kind of like,
and for what it's worth, when you know he's talking about a booking email, so he's sending out you were trying to book a show.
Book a show,
obviously, locally here.
It's funny because it's like I kind of already knew the prerequisites to like playing a show,
right? But you were feeling it out.
But I was feeling it out because this is the thing I did. The way I worded the email, it's because like my thing is like I've always had this like preconception of like how things work here.
Right.
It's very different from Laredo. Very different.
Of course.
But I had this preconception. I had these preconceptions of like how it operates. So to offset that, I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna stop like speculating and being in the dark. Let me just ask.
Right.
That's kind of how I formed this email. It wasn't like, hey, I want to play this show on this date,
right?
You know, because...
Can you help me?
Can you help me?
Right.
No, the way I worded it, like not verbatim, but like it was just, I'm green to this.
Right.
Can you like help me like explain to me what the criteria is and what you need from me in order for me to be able to book a show?
Yeah, I think I just realized that is how you phrased it, you know, when you showed it to me, and their response was about social media, which, you know, it's kind of neither here nor there, but in some ways they did give you information that you needed.
It's a tidbit, you know what I mean? But it's just kind of like, what that kind of told me was like, well, I kind of already fucking knew that. Like, like I know I need like a social media presence, but I didn't think... It just, I feel like what it kind of made worse was that, and this could be something that I could just stop from this point and not like, you know, speculate too much.
Right.
But what that told me was like, does this mean that there's a follower
prerequisite?
Right. Do you need some kind of content? And then like I also try to be positive about it and be like, well, maybe they're just gonna pull it and just be like, all right, well, I'm just gonna like review this, you know, and maybe like chain some complementary sounds together and maybe like set, you know, bills that way.
Right.
But then that's that's way too much speculation.
Sure, right.
I don't know.
Exactly.
You know, and maybe that's not a good route to go down because I do tend to do that. I do tend to kind of like consider all the possibilities
of what. I'm right there with you. But to be fair, I think going back to what you were saying earlier, maybe it's enough that you did it, and you know, because again, it's been a couple of years since you actually, you know, reached out and tried putting something together.
And you know what that actually did for me? That was almost like the catalyst to me figuring out like, hey, I can just have an all-encompassing like page
project thing
for everything I do.
Right.
Because I didn't like prior to that, I was still in the dark. I was just like, oh, I have too many projects. How do I like consolidate everything? And you know, I honestly, prior to this and during the past like maybe 2-3 weeks, way like after our initial podcast, I was like, okay, I'm gonna re-record all my music under my name, but it'll be new versions. I'm like, you know, I had this whole like concept that I was doing. I tried doing it, and I was like, this is a lot of fucking work.
You were trying to pull a Taylor Swift, and
yeah.
And you were like, oh, she has the resources and the money.
Yeah. Well, even so, bro, I just don't care. Yeah, I don't care to do it.
Like, because it's in the past. Yeah. There's obviously there's a very specific reason why she was doing it. You know, ownership.
Yeah. There's money involved.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
You own everything.
I own everything. It was just like kind of like a detailed thing.
Sure.
That didn't matter.
Yeah.
It was just more like skirting around the actual issue, which is just like, dude, my shit's fine. You know what I mean? I just need to be like, hey, it's me. It's me.
I'm the solution. It's me.
Yeah, like, and it's fine. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm doing that now.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see like positive results from it. Like, and it's just like, oh, this was the solution all along.
Sure.
When people think about whatever I do, it's not that they're thinking about the thing, they're thinking about me.
Right.
And that's not like me being like super like blowing smoke up my own ass. It's just like I feel like sometimes people don't even like think about Creature in the Spiral. They think about Raul who makes
Creature in the Spiral.
Creature in the Spiral.
Yeah. And again, it just goes back to taking ownership of what's
And
yours.
I don't know why I felt so like ashamed of doing that.
Again, imaginary obstacles.
Yeah,
right?
imaginary
just,
era.
just thinking that like, oh well, what if it doesn't work out, or what if people think this, or what, it's just all speculation.
And like and you're yeah self-imposed.
But I do like that how can I say this? I feel like the more that's been happening we almost do this weird like mind meld where like we encourage each other without even trying. Because I feel like when I was kind of starting to put the group together and I was feeling really productive and I was we've got like I think like 2 hours worth of material like of my originals. And I would tell you about it, and I'd be like, "Hey, we're getting closer. We're gonna start playing shows." I feel like it was doing something to you.
I was kind of like, all right, yeah, it's time to like stop fucking around. You know what I mean? Like, because dude, it really was like for a long time there. Like, I think I just got so used to like not doing anything. Because look, like, and there was kind of like a conversation I had with Nicole like a while back.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is maybe like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where like I would acknowledge that I wasn't doing anything,
Right.
or doing anything like project related or music related, and she was just like, maybe you're just tired.
Yeah.
Because you kind of went really hard for like several years.
Yep.
And then maybe you needed a break. And I think I did allow myself that break, as much as I tortured myself the whole time, like, about it. I did need a break, man.
Yeah.
The logistics of setting up shows and doing practices, and that's work.
Well, and the good thing is you can, again, talking about like trying to find capacity for everything. I mean, you're in a position to dictate whatever you want to put into it. You know, if you don't necessarily want to book a bunch of shows right away, you don't have to.
No.
Obviously, it's also not the easiest thing to do, so that helps.
Yeah.
But, you don't have to be recording all the time. You don't have to be writing all the time.
That's another thing too, man. I got these drums and stuff, and I have all this like, gear and stuff, and I'm just kind of like, I don't have to play these shits every day.
Nope.
I don't have to make music every day. I don't have to music at all or think about it or listen to it every day. I don't.
Right.
If I don't do it for 3 months, like, who cares?
Sure.
But there will be moments within those 3 months where I'm like, oh no.
Why? It's going to waste.
Yeah.
I know.
Like, and ultimately, bro, like, who cares? I need to like start. The more I tell myself like, who cares? And the more I tell myself like, nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like I'll eventually get to it.
What's gonna happen? Like, what are we losing? What do you think? Where does that pressure come from? Like, what are we doing?
Impatience.
Just impatience.
Impatience. That's what I think it is. Like, I think it's impatience.
Just like something should be happening. Why is it not happening? Oh, it's because I'm not doing anything.
And because I'm not doing anything, it's this idea of like
spinning my wheels.
But yeah, productive. You know what I mean? Productivity. Go.
Yeah.
And that's not even a cultural thing. That's just a societal thing, man.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's just a general mentality, right? And I feel like it's come up a couple of times that I've seen it, where they're basically talking about how things like art and stuff, like the idea of going back to, those are just things that people do. They're not necessarily supposed to be monetized.
No.
Like art and creativity and stuff. Like, hey, it's great if you want to make a living off of it. 100% get your bag, But those are also just things that we should be doing. We're not necessarily just made to work.
Exactly, bro. But to some extent, and this is a conversation I've been having with like Saul recently, which is like, you kind of don't have to do anything, bro.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's fine. And, you don't want to fucking make a song or think about music for 5 seconds. Like, give yourself a break.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
That's another thing, too. Not beating yourself up when you're taking a break.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you can take a break. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to be like, hey, get back to work. Like, it's
just like, or just the idea of like, not doing anything. What is wrong with that? I mean, obviously, it can become a habit. Maybe not a great one, a habit of not doing anything. But yeah, I think there's a lot of...
As long as it's not affecting your income, like, and your ability to have a roof over your head and food.
Right. Then
bro,
what's the take a break?
Fuck off as much as you
Figure
want,
out
bro.
figure out something. Yeah, just relax.
Yeah, just relax.
I feel like there's a lot more power in not doing anything sometimes.
Rest, man.
Yeah.
Rest. People vastly underestimate the power of rest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And sometimes you don't even realize you need it.
Yeah. No, definitely not.
Yeah.
It's just like I feel like that's the case for a lot of things where you don't even realize, where your head is at.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me ask you a question.
Yep.
You slept in. Envision this.
Yeah.
You slept in?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to kick yourself in the ass about it?
No.
See, sometimes I do.
Yeah. And I understand. I definitely understand that. There's a reason why I don't kick myself when I sleep in, and it's because normally I don't.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily... And so along that line of thinking, just because you wake up early doesn't mean you're necessarily productive.
Yeah,
and that's me. Sometimes I wake up early, but I'm not necessarily, at least productive in the way that people would probably think. I'm also not a farmer, so I don't have
Another thing too is that, just because you're awake doesn't mean you're not resting.
Right. That's a good point too. Yeah. Everybody's like, no, it has to be waking time is moving around time, productivity time.
No.
Eyes closed, that's sleeping time only. It's like, well, sometimes you just have to chill.
Yeah, I'm conscious, but I'm just going to move from my bed to the couch.
Yeah.
I'm just changing locations.
Yeah, just to kind of get, how does the couch feel today?
Yeah, I'm just going to sip on some coffee. It's just kind of like...
You got to, I know, and that's the thing. I think it's going to speak to the larger point, because we've been talking about how music is something that we get to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything is something that we get to do.
Yeah. It kind of sounds a little obvious when you say it out loud, right?
And that's the sad thing, right? Is that the most obvious things will only come up after we talk, we're having these kind of conversations. Everything is anything that you just get to do. And the sad thing is, and I'm not saying that you should get into the habit of comparing yourself all the time. The sad thing is not everyone gets to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the tragedy. And that's
where I think coming back and like, giving yourself a pat on the back and saying, I'm good enough.
Yeah.
And I did cool shit today.
Yeah.
Like that ties in with that. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, dude, you've worked your ass off to get to do this.
Yep.
Maybe that's what you need to add prior to I get to do this, which is I worked so hard and got so far.
But in the end, it kind of mattered.
Okay.
Hopefully it matters.
Yeah, hopefully it matters. No, like I worked so hard that I get to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
I worked so hard that I get to rest.
Yeah.
Like I work so hard that I get to play music.
Yep.
Like I don't know. That's my perspective with it, dude. I feel like I'm totally gonna name the episode I'm good enough.
I'm good enough.
And I do cool stuff every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main point for me, at least. Like that's my main point for this. This episode. It's like
that's a great takeaway. I don't know. I don't necessarily know that I had a thesis or something for today.
I kind of like dude. Earlier, before we started doing this, I was like, I don't even know what we're gonna fucking talk about today.
Yeah.
But I felt like so much goes on throughout the week that you're like, it's almost impossible not to have something to talk about.
Yeah.
That's why so many people have podcasts.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And we're just two other guys just throwing their hats in the ring to talk about.
That's the thing. Like, it's not for that. It's literally for us.
Exactly. And that's really the point. I mean, I think the only reason why we're doing it in this manner is, I don't know, just the hope that if somebody's listening, whoever chooses to listen or wants to listen, they're like, hey, they're right.
And then another thing too, man, is that, especially when you're putting it out on the internet,
right.
Like people do listen.
Sure.
It may not be 1 million people, but you got to also think about it, dude. If one person told you hi today and complimented you, or no, take that back. If one person looked at you today, you're going to think, dang, one person acknowledged me today.
That was a big impact.
Yeah. Now imagine that, but you don't have that face-to-face interaction.
Right.
So somebody's acknowledging what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And there's been so many things that I have found that, are maybe unknown to, the vast majority of people, but I'm like, man, I'm really happy about that. And sometimes I'll just randomly think about it, and I'll go back and look for it, and I'm like, it's still there, and it brings me comfort, and whether that's something that happens with what we do, whether it's this or the songs that we write, the music that we record, or whatever, it is rewarding. I mean, hell, like I sent my mom the lyrics to a song I was working on, and she was like, this has really made me think about a lot of things. And I just couldn't help but think, like, damn, I'm actually getting the response that I've always wanted from an audience, but from my mom.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't just like, oh, this is so great, and I'm so proud of you. It was like this, like...
It was a sincere reaction.
Yeah, she was like,
an earnest reaction.
Yeah, she was telling me, like, this made me think a lot about my own life, and, like, it really affected me, and I feel like it came at the right time, and I'm like, oh, damn. Like, that was intense.
Yeah.
And so...
Also, like, another thing with that, it's like, or like to jump off of that, it's like you kind of can't like pick and choose who you impact.
Yeah. You might want to. And again, it's just this, again, a cycle of imposing. It's either society imposing on us, or we're imposing on ourselves, or we're imposing on other people. It's just a society of imposition.
Yeah.
and instead, it's just like, well, maybe not blind acceptance, but at least just like, hey, everything's cool.
I'm acknowledgeable.
Exactly. I acknowledge you, you acknowledge me.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing, dude. Like, I've talked about it with a couple friends before who like kind of like, they put out their stuff, and sometimes they're kind of like, oh, like,
I didn't get a response.
Yeah. Or if they get a response, it's not from like people that they feel like they wanted, which is, like, that's crazy to think about. But it's like sometimes, you go into it like, oh, I'm making this thing in the hopes that I fall into a certain crowd, and you don't. But you fail to acknowledge the crowd that you did fall into. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just a lot of like
variables. Just things you don't even think about. It's so funny every time we have these kind of conversations, and this happened also last time with the first episode. I was just like, it simultaneously makes me, it's like a clean slate, and it makes me feel like, man, I'm ready to go, get back into music. And yet also similarly being like, I never want to play music again. But it's because I'm like, hey, that was enough. It almost strikes a chord somehow that a guitar can't. I don't need to go be creative right away, because I'm like, hey, like, I got to have a conversation about how it's okay. Like, it's going to be okay. We get to do the things that we get to do, and sometimes that's enough. We impact people's lives in different ways. Doesn't always have to be music. So it's weird to feel like, man, I could go do anything. I feel like I could write 1,000,000 songs, and I'm like, you know what? But I'm probably not, and that's okay.
And that's cool.
I'm just gonna go live my life and enjoy the rest of my day or something. And then whenever I feel like I'm ready to write a song, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And
it may be a good one. It may be a bad one.
But you've made me realize the importance of writing the crappy stuff, because I think we talked about how a lot of people, the different ways that people view like writer's block. And some people think it's like, oh, I'd never write anything. But really the sinister thing about writer's block is that technically you're kind of always writing. You just hate everything. So the block is that you can't acknowledge when you feel like you can't acknowledge that something is good.
I usually think that stems from like your mind starting to shift into what it views as like, this is a reflection of myself
right
now.
Right.
And when you're still making stuff that's kind of like the old you, that's where you start hitting that like I'm kind of stuck in this like weird transitionary part where I'm almost unable to make things that reflect me currently.
Right.
Because you're always changing, whether you realize it or not.
That's 100%. And your taste is always changing,
and your music is always going to be a reflection of that. Because it is a picture of your creativity.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's an image, and when that image doesn't reflect where you're at now, like that's where you experience that thing.
That's really interesting. So, do you feel like whenever something comes out that you're not necessarily like, oh, this is not who I really am right now? Is it just like remnants, I guess,
of it? There, I like to think of it like the opposite, which is there's traces of what I think I am now in this,
okay,
but it's not 100% there.
Gotcha.
That's why I still put those things out.
Gotcha.
I will never hold back any music.
Right.
I will always drop stuff because at the end of the day, you got to think of it like a metamorphosis kind of thing, dude.
Right.
You know, it isn't the caterpillar doesn't just become the butterfly
Right.
from one day to the next.
Right.
There's a chrysalis, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then even so, it's forming within, you know what I mean? Like, there's several stages, you know what I mean? It's an evolution
Sure.
of the transition between who you were then as a creative and who you are now as a creative. And you need to acknowledge that those transitionary phases may not be exactly like what you want because you have like maybe your mind's a little farther ahead than what you're able to produce.
Right.
But those transitionary periods are still valid.
That's such a much more refreshing take and perspective on that than I think I had before, because I think I always subscribed to this idea. There's this Ira Glass, I think is his name, and he's from NPR, and he kind of like there's a quote that he has that kind of gave me my perspective that I really enjoyed actually, because he'd always talk about the idea of taste. Right, you have taste as a creative. Anybody that does writing or any kind of creative work, like you have your level of taste and what your standard of what that taste is and what you think is good. And so you spend your creative career, and I don't mean career as in you're getting paid for it, just career, your lifetime, your lifespan as a creative,
Your body of work.
Exactly. You spend that time almost trying to align your output with your taste. You know what you like, you know what's good, so now you're trying to push yourself to get there. Which I was like, that's great. That's neat. That's a brilliant idea, because it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But it's also kind of cold in some ways. There's no
you're invalidating your growth.
Right. And even if that wasn't his intention, right? Because again, he's just trying to put an explanation, right, but behind what it is that we view as good and what we're trying to do ourselves. But yeah, it's a little, it's too almost scientific. It's too distant. It's too cold. And so the way that you were describing it, that almost makes me feel like warm and fuzzier, because it's like, hey, it is evolution.
It's more organic,
yeah,
because it's just like that. You can't go into thinking like that stuff is so binary like that, where it's like it's either good or it's bad.
Right.
No, bro. Like nothing you make as an individual will ever on any plane of existence be bad. The idea of bad, it to me is fabricated from the idea that like this isn't sellable.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because motherfuckers just don't want you to make money off of like every little thing you make.
Right.
Or whoever, you know what I mean?
Which is kind of weird, because I feel like we're at a time in history where like everybody's making money off of anything.
That's you know what I mean? And
it's funny to have that perspective, because now I'm like, oh damn, like maybe that's just the aggressive reaction to so much like this is good, this is bad. It's like, well, you know what? Now everyone's got a chance to do something, and you're all gonna listen to it.
Yeah,
you're all gonna recognize it.
Criticism shouldn't be exclusive
right.
to only particular people.
Right.
That's why like I feel like the idea of a critic is dead, because everybody's a critic.
Right.
Everybody can have an opinion.
For sure.
Which is fine. But it's like, just because you have an opinion doesn't mean like that should like impose like any type of like metric or value onto what you're doing. Because that's what, to me, that's why I say like nothing's bad, because I think I'm just so, genius motherfucker artist. like nothing's bad, bro. It's just, if you don't get it, you don't get it. That's fine. Like, you can't tell me that the way I lived my life and the artistic representation of the way I existed is bad. That's crazy. Yeah. What a fucking like egomaniac.
How dare you? Yeah.
To try to just have an opinion on what the fuck somebody's making.
What are your thoughts on, because now I'm really in, not that I wasn't before, but now I'm really like wanting to dig into this idea of like subjective versus objective, something good, something bad. What about the division between like something that's authentic versus inauthentic? That seems to exist.
I think when something is classified as inauthentic, it's because the intention of the thing was to not to make it, but to achieve some other goal.
Right.
That's where the inauthenticity comes from. But that's just somebody like applying that type of like label to that thing. You know what I mean? Just because I'm making something that's a super like hardcore ripoff of something else because that something else makes money.
Right.
Like the point of me making this isn't just to make it like as an expression, a form of expression. It's so I can make money.
Right.
You know, it's inauthentic in the sense that that you're not making it for the purpose that, you know, that I would imagine it would be made for, but it's authentic in the sense that you're authentically trying to make money. Right. You know what I mean? Sure. Like, it's like, I think that's where I think a lot of those, you know, those labels and like they are rooted in a way to, you know, I guess just warn people about like, hey, just so you know, the reason for the creation of this thing isn't what you think it is. You know what I mean? So I think people do that. They like label something authentic and inauthentic. You know what I mean? Now, when it's authentic, it's like, I'm making this because I just want to.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's no other reason. It's very, you know, one dimensional. Like, I'm just doing the thing. That is like, I guess, technically like utmost like authenticity.
Sure.
You know what I mean? When there's an ulterior motive, like that isn't just like a one dimensional, like I'm just doing the thing. I'm performing the action.
Right.
It's when you're performing the action in order to receive some kind of reaction.
Right.
With the expectation of a reaction, which is like money or attention or whatever.
Or adulation or whatever.
Yeah. And that's the inauthenticity.
You know, this conversation, man, I feel like this is going in a direction that I was not expecting. And I almost want to take it and keep going down this path. But it just makes me think about the people that I've talked to about, you know, like how we were saying, you know, obviously we're at a time in history where a lot of people have the opportunity to create and to put something out there for themselves, right? And along with that, along with the ability for everyone and anyone to do that, is the rise of anyone and everyone to comment on it and to categorize it. And sometimes be aggressively critical about it. So you know,
just ignore it.
You have the rise. I feel like the rise of the cringe is what I'm going to call it. You know, and obviously on social media, there are things that people categorize as cringe, and I mean, I feel like there should be
like in the sense that this thing that you made is kind of whack. So
yes, and I feel like there's there's obviously an abundance of internet lingo out there, and I feel like I'm sure somebody's done it, but to define currently what cringe is for social media and especially applicable to like creative output. You know, something being cringe is something embarrassing, right? Something like you should be embarrassed that you did this. This isn't this. What is this? You know, and I think to certain things like there was a page I think that you might have shown me on.
Catatonic Youth.
Catatonic Youths, yeah. And it was on Twitter, and there's remnants of it on YouTube, and I think it's probably on X now or whatever. If it's continuing,
it's still there. It's still there, but I think it's on Instagram now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's on all the.
I'm gonna find it.
Yeah, I think it's on all the social media platforms, and so obviously, I don't know. I mean, people can get some perverted sense of enjoyment from that, right? But why? Like you're seeing people that are contributing and creating something, but people have their minds made up once they see certain things about whether it's good or bad, inauthentic versus authentic, corny versus sincere, and sometimes being sincere is corny to people. Being earnest, you know.
That's always going to take form in different ways, bro. Because it's like, you know, for example, a lot of the stuff on Catatonic Youth, like it's corny or cringe because it's like, you know, stuff that's out of style for the most part, stuff that's mediocre for the most part, whether it be the cinematography or whether it be like the production or whether it be like the actual writing in a person's opinion,
in somebody's opinion,
right?
That it would be categorized as that.
Yeah. Like, and it's just they're trying to like centralize it as like this is what it is. You know what I mean? Because dude, honestly, some of the stuff on there, like I feel sometimes it's like it's not like it's like the worst thing in the world, but then there's other things that are just gold, like just comedy gold, like come to my pool party, like that shit's amazing. Like in no way is this bad to me.
Okay.
Like just because it's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, and I know the purpose of it being on there was that this is lame.
Sure.
But
and that's the thing, right? Is that there's this layer of irony. Is there an ironic intention behind stuff like this getting?
There can be.
Yeah.
There can be. You know what I mean?
It's interesting.
It just depends. Like, and then that kind of goes with the mindset of like, how serious do you take yourself?
Yeah.
And usually when you do that, it's not always the best thing.
When you take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, of course not. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think the Come to My Pool Party kid was super like, oh my God, this is like the most fire fucking track like ever.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because I don't know. I mean, you'd like to think that what you're creating is honest and sincere and you know that you're trying to produce something that you know you believe in or whatever.
That stems from you cut off your intention at like making it or creating the thing. That's where it cuts off. That's where authenticity lies. Where it becomes inauthentic is when you have that expectation afterwards.
Gotcha.
The moment you cross that threshold, it's inauthentic.
And how is that? How do you think that is demonstrated?
Like
in real time or like in the physical realm, I guess. Like
you just pay no mind to it. You pay no. It's very difficult. It's very difficult because it's like you can do it in different forms. It's like I posted this thing, so I'm expecting a reaction.
Right.
Posting anything is going to elicit a reaction.
Sure.
But you can also just post stuff for reference.
Sure.
Or for other people's enjoyment. Yeah. But like the thing is that like you don't go into it counting how many times somebody enjoyed it.
Right.
That's where the expectation lies.
Right.
That's where like you're crossing that threshold.
Yeah, and that's definitely a cycle. Again, a vicious cycle that you know I tend to fall into sometimes. I'm like, oh well, this didn't get as many likes as I wanted to. You know,
and you gotta stop yourself there and be like, I'm doing it again.
Yeah,
you're doing it.
You're doing it, Peter. That's my favorite thing to say. That should be the title of the episode. You're doing it, Peter. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously it's a culture of people that sort of chase what I think you've used that great word. People chase clout, people chase followers, people chase, you know, anything and everything, attention, whatever the case, you know. But I don't know. It just feels like it ends up driving you crazy.
There's no point to it, you know what I mean? You're disturbing your own peace kind of for nothing. I think you can have it up. This is kind of the mentality I have with this now, actually, like, which is, this is for me and my friends.
Yeah.
You know, because I know my friends appreciate me, and even my family to some extent. Like, I know my family appreciates me. I know my friends appreciate me.
Right.
This is all that. These are the only people I really care to show this to.
Right.
Anybody beyond that, cool, but I'm not going to pay attention to that. I'm just going to focus on the fact that, like, I have, you know, a couple friends on my thing, and I talk to them as much as I can, and I get to enjoy myself with those people as much as I can while I'm still here. And anything beyond that, you can kind of deem it as a little bit greedy. You can kind of deem it as a little bit, like, egotistical, because it's just kind of like, bro, like, no aspects of that type of validation, whether it's metrics, whether it's, you know, comments or like whatever, like none of that should really like factor into your day-to-day, like at all.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think you just need to keep making stuff and post it online because I want to listen to it. There's people that definitely want to listen to it.
Right. Like
I used to think the otherwise, but that's not true. Like, people do want to listen to what you do. So, yeah, dude. I don't know. I
think the bottom line of I guess, I don't know. I guess the thesis that I didn't think I was gonna come up with was like, gotta find peace in like being your own audience. Like just be your own audience.
Yeah. That's perfect. Being your own audience. Like,
and the funny thing is, I always feel like that's the case because I'm like, I do this because I enjoy it. I want to. I tell everybody, I'm like, I just want to hear myself, and then not in an egotistical way. I was like, I just love music, and I'm writing songs because I drew inspiration from people.
Yeah,
and so you just got to be your own audience.
Definitely, dude. Like, and I think the biggest takeaway for that is like, one thing I've always known is that I love like recording.
Right.
I love getting to listen to my demos, before bed. And that I feel like there's nothing in this world that compares to that. Like it's so fun. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think getting to enjoy what you make should be like my main goal. Is just yeah. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this is just I'm good enough, and I make cool shit.
Yeah.
Every single day.
And
even if it's not every day, that's fine too.
That's okay too. Yeah. Just do what you do. And exist.
Do what you do. You know that song?
I don't think so.
Mudvayne. But all right, man. It was good having you.
Hell yeah, man.
We'll do episode 3.
Yeah.
At some point, maybe. We'll see.
The monthly music mental health meetup. Take it easy, man.
We need a new intro.
Maybe. That was pretty good though.
Yeah.
We'll just clip that and use that every time.
The King of the Hill.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll see you next time, dude.
Later, dude.